Hello and welcome to this School of Humankind free event. My name is Wyndham. I am the BluePrint coach. Welcome to BluePrint Coach HQ. It looks a bit like a cupboard. It's actually a perfectly sized small room. But welcome. School of Humankind was set up, the way I see the School of Humankind is, it was set up really as an antidote to what feels like an ever-expanding division in the world, an increasing polarization, the seemingly intentional stripping away of nuance and complexity, of being able to have a conversation from different standpoints and walk away without having fallen out. And I think the reason I joined School of Humankind is because this has been set up ideally to create a community of similar-minded people, people who want community, who want connection, who are interested in different things, are curious about the things they don't already know, and who want a space where we can have conversations, we can disagree, all with a deep respect and love for each other, and we can learn new things. And so this evening, as I start all of my talks or webinars or whatever they might be, I have a very clear belief, a strong belief, that we cannot address what we aren't aware of. Full stop. I also believe we cannot broaden our awareness beyond or deeper than the things we already think we know, the things we already believe we are certain about. And so I ask for the next half hour, 40 minutes, however long this goes on for. I am on the clock. I need to go and pick my wife up from the station at some point. I ask two things. I ask you to hold in your mind, what if what Wyndham is saying is true? What would be possible for me if that were the case? And the second thing is an attitude. I would ask you to attempt to bridge to 10%. We're going to talk about reacting and responding. And our reaction very typically is to shut down what we hear. There's a judgment involved, and as soon as we are judging, we are no longer curious. And when we're no longer curious, where are we bridging to? A divide is formed. So I'm not trying to persuade you of anything. I am not trying to convince you to follow the BluePrint philosophy or anything I talk about. But I do ask you to try to bridge to 10%, because there is something we can learn from everybody and in every situation. Might not be what I intend, but there is definitely something to learn. Okay, so this evening is learning to respond instead of reacting. And I think it's fairly certain, talking about certainties, this is one I am certain of. We all have experience where we've reacted, where those deep emotions have welled up and we have acted in a way without thinking. I'm going to give you three examples, two that involve me directly and one that I was witness to. But I would also ask that, think back to the last time it happened to you. In my experience, there's this moment where we suddenly find ourselves in reaction rather than, oh, I can see I'm in the build up to it. I'm suddenly reacted. Now, three examples. The first one, a number of years ago, I trained as a yoga teacher, and as part of that training, I was required to write an essay on the 8 limbs of yoga. I'm not going to fill you in on all of those because, one, I don't remember, two, it's not about that. But I chose to write about ahimsa, which is a concept of non-violence. And it is not just non-violence externally, but it is non-violence in thought, in word, and deed, both externally and internally. So I've been spending 2 or 3 hours writing this essay, immersing myself in this concept of ahimsa, this kind of peaceful, tranquil, love-filled approach to myself and other people. Finish the essay, put the kettle on, we haven't got any milk. So I jump in the car, drive to our local co-op, and it's absolutely rammed. There are no parking spaces, so we're all sat in a queue waiting to find a space. And as a car pulls out of the space, I'm next in line. I have to drive past the space to reverse in because I don't have the angle. And while I'm waiting, the person behind me drives around me and shapes up to take my parking space. And without thinking, I see, I pull forward and I block the space. So this person cannot drive into it. And I am enraged at the audacity of this person to not stay in a queue. We're British. We understand this intrinsically. And I lost my mind. And I was there for about 4 or 5 minutes, gesticulating at this person, not shouting, but constantly just demanding they tell me what they're doing. Second example, when we moved in here, I may well have told this before, I love it. The second that we moved in here and my wife asked me to put up a clothesline on the outside of the house, and I resist drilling holes in a perfectly good, well-built house. I don't know why, but it perturbs me. Anyway, with a history of procrastination, she was expecting it to take weeks. I did it the second day we were here, but I mucked it up. Didn't measure it properly, put it at the wrong height, took it off the wall, already feeling very angry with myself. Messed it up a second time, so now that outside wall is just full of holes. Even angrier with myself. Finally get it right on the third attempt. My wife comes downstairs and goes, "Oh my God, I wasn't expecting you to put that up." My instant reaction was, this is what happens when you don't let me procrastinate. Instant emotional reaction. And the third one, not about me, but I used to work in central London, and when you take the tube at rush hour, everybody piles out the train. There's a escalator up to the gates, and there's this big bottleneck. And if you're polite, you wait at the back of the bottleneck and feed on as normal people. If you're me, you skirt around the edge and you try and skip in to get on the left because you're going to walk up. And I've cut out this entire queue, and I'm just about to step on the escalator, and the guy I'm stepping in front of loses his mind. Just screams at me for being rude and how arrogant I was and blah, 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 blah. So 3 instances where something has happened and there's an immediate emotional reaction. Not in response, we are in reaction. And I want to use this as an opportunity to plant a couple of ideas for you. And I want us to start thinking about reactions as disempowerment. And I would like us to start thinking of responding as empowerment. Because if we are not thinking, if it is all automatic and we suddenly find ourselves in this emotional state, then where's that coming from? Are we being intentional? No, because it's automatic. So I just want us to start thinking about this in a slightly different way. That's all well and good. But what are we actually dealing with? Let's start building our awareness. So I'm the Blueprint coach. I 100% believe we all have a blueprint. And that blueprint's purpose is to automate how we react to what's going on around us and to us. There is so much complexity in the world. If we had to leave the house and analyze everything every minute of the day, we couldn't exist in that way. So our blueprint automates all of that for us. But its primary purpose is to keep us alive. It's to keep us surviving rather than thriving. It's not interested in that. It just wants us to get to the end of every day. So we have this blueprint that is automating our reactions. And those automations are based on the things we think we believe and the things we believe to be true. And the vast majority of them, and there are countless of them, I'm still in search of mine, a whole load of mine, because we don't know they're there until we get triggered. Once we're triggered, that for me is a big, massive piece of information that says, this is interesting. Wasn't aware of that before. Why don't I take a look at that? But the beliefs and truths that we think we have nothing to do with an objective truth. And here's that, can you bridge to 10%? Here's a challenging concept that the things we think we believe and the things we believe to be true have vanishingly little to do with any objective truth. They are established through repetition. We hear things when we are younger that shape our perspective of the outside world. Our parents will tell us things about other people, about other countries, about situations, about all sorts of things that ultimately will affect us to a greater or lesser degree. But with repetition comes solidification, comes certainty. And that is all our truths and beliefs are doing. It's relatively easy to at least give ourselves a glimpse that this could be true. Because if our truths and beliefs were absolute truths and beliefs, then everybody would have the same. There cannot be variation in the truth. But even when we think of our reactions, well, not everybody reacts the same way in the same situation at the same time. So there has to be variation. And if there's variation, then can it really be the truth? And this whole process, I'm a coach, I work with people's limiting beliefs all the time. And the reason we can work with them is because they're not true. So can we start to bring this concept of actually the things I think I believe and the things I believe to be true are simply stabilizers. They create predictability in the world around me and about me, so I know what to expect, both from the world and from myself. None of it is the objective truth of what is possible. So our reactions are triggered when one of those truths or beliefs is threatened. These are the pillars that hold up the stability of our world. So if something happens that threatens that stability, we react emotionally. One of the big problems we have is it typically happens, we are brought up to value being right. We are rewarded for being right through our school days. We are rewarded professionally for getting it right, being right. And there is this deep conditioning that we want to be right. So when we are challenged, we often see that as an attack on us being right, and therefore we also react to that. Stability of our world, I'm right. Somebody's challenging it, we react. A further problem we have to deal with is written about by Professor Steve Peters. He wrote a book called The Chimp Paradox. And that emotional, reactive side of us, that part of our brain, reacts 20 times faster than the logical, thinking, reasoned part of our brain, which is why we suddenly find ourselves in these emotional situations. When our thinking brain kicks in, it's like, why am I shouting at this bloke in a car? And why am I blocking this parking space? And why is everybody looking at me like I'm a weirdo? That chimp paradox brain, the chimp brain, the old ancient brain, the reactive, can I protect you brain, is 20 times faster. So we're going to pause, bridge to 10%. Can you act, or rather pose yourself the question, what if all of this is true? If this is the bedrock we are dealing with, what if the things I think I believe, the things I believe to be true, they're just stabilizers? How is the world stabilized for me? What are my expectations of myself and of the world as a result of the stabilizers I have been conditioned into believing? Not a comfortable thing for me when I first had to look at that, but a massively important part of dealing with our limiting self-beliefs, fundamentally moving from a pattern of reaction, if that is your pattern, to one of response. So let's do that. Let's talk about what can we actually do. There's background theory. There's this idea of, just let stuff go. Don't react. Not helpful. Because we're going to 20 times faster, remember. Okay, so how do we move from reaction to response? This is fundamentally an exercise in awareness. I deal with people all the time. I work with people all the time who are trying to play the checkmate move first. Now, if you play chess, you can't. You have to play the moves that set up the board. You have to react to what the other person is doing. And only after, depending on how good you are, a series of moves can you then execute the checkmate move. That's what this is going to be. There is no situation. If you've never practiced your awareness around reaction and have never consciously, deliberately, and intentionally looked to do something about it, there is no world where you solve this overnight. Doesn't work that way. So I want to give you 3 things to bring your awareness to. Can you broaden to these 3 and deepen your awareness of these 3 for you? Number 1, when you're reflecting on a situation you have had an emotional reaction in, how has the reaction served you? I'm not interested in the trigger. I'm not interested in any of those kind of things at the moment. What we're looking for is, does this reaction actually serve me any benefit? I'm not quite sure. Well, I wasn't sure for a very long time why I was very responsive, not reactive. I always have been. I always took it as a really positive thing about myself. I always considered myself to be very measured. It was feedback I got from colleagues and friends. You never react. You're always very calm. And I now realize that that in itself is a protection mechanism. At some point, my behavior changed to be responsive so that maybe I wasn't wrong, so that I didn't get into trouble, so that I didn't fly off the handle, whatever it might be. But what I've found is the very few times I have allowed that emotion to rule me and I have spoken from that emotional place, I always have had to repair some damage. I've always had to then have a subsequent conversation about the reaction rather than necessarily what the problem was in the first place. So I solve the reaction, I repair that relationship, but then we both go on our way because, well, we've already had that really uncomfortable conversation and I had to apologize and I had to do this and I felt I needed to do that. And we never get to the problem. So first and foremost, how does your reaction serve you one way or another? Be clear, be honest. Number 2, we spoke about truths and beliefs being stabilizers, creating certainty, and that we are triggered when one of those certainty pillars is threatened. So which of your certainties was threatened when you reacted? This is all after the fact, right? That's not an easy question to answer. It is never the first answer you come to. Sorry, talk about frustration. It takes time, but it is absolutely worth it to persevere. Because once we identify, actually, the certainty I held was this, and the reaction was this, and it didn't serve me in this way, then we start moving back to a point where we can start challenging the certainties and rewriting those certainties, giving ourselves more space so that how we react, ideally how we respond, does serve us. Number 3, is it really about the trigger? Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's a question that should be a statement. It's never about the trigger. We've already kind of covered it in the idea of it's easy to understand. It's simple to approach truths and beliefs from the perspective of they've got nothing to do with the truth. Otherwise, everybody would believe and think the same things, and we don't. If it was about the trigger, everybody would react the same way about the trigger. So the big difference in my life was when I stopped looking outside of me. It's so easy to say that person did X and therefore it impacted me in this way and I did Y. It's so easy to blame situations or other people. When we do that, we disempower ourselves because we cannot control any of that. The only thing we have any hope of controlling is ourselves. So can we use it? I said earlier that actually a moment of being triggered for me now is, this is brilliant because it gives me the opportunity to interrogate what is that certainty Where does it come from? Is it still valid? So the three things I would remind us to bring our awareness to broaden our awareness and deepen our awareness. How does your reaction serve you? Which certainty is being threatened? And is it really about the trigger? No, it's not. How can you start looking at yourself in a way that moves you forward? Okay, so that's what we're looking to bring our awareness to. But how do we do it? What do we do? I see a lot of leadership coaching and training and decision-making training referring to the armed services. And I don't tend to like doing it. The environments are very, very different. There are very few jobs that you actually have to put your life in the hands of somebody else. They do. It requires a different level of trust. It requires a different level of everything. However, having said that, there is an ex Special Air Service soldier called Jason Fox. He does the TV SAS, trained to be in the SAS. I can't remember the TV program, but he's now a TV presenter. But I saw him interviewed, and somebody was saying, when you're in the field and you're out in a war zone and somebody fires on you, you must have to react instantly. And he said, actually, the greatest tool they have and they are taught is get safe, right? Clearly, that is most important. Find something to hide behind. But once you've found cover, pause. Take a moment. So there'll be members of his unit rolling cigarettes and smoking. There'll be members of his unit making a cup of tea, and they will take the time. They will actively create time to figure out what the next action should be that serves them best. They allow the emotion to drop and allow their thinking mind to kick in and go, actually, fine, this is a bit of a mess. What do we need to do in order to achieve the goal we've been set? And that is it for how we start this work. We pause, we give up, we create some time after the fact to reflect on it, to think about it. Because like I say, you won't be able to resolve it instantly. So getting used to the fact that you will be triggered, you will react, and then you have the opportunity after the event to reflect on it. That is how we build awareness of these truths and beliefs, the kind of things that trigger us, the certainties we think we hold. So we've had a moment, we give ourselves some time and we think, what was the trigger? What happened? What was the trigger? This is where we can start talking about the other person as well, because something they did threatened our certainty. So we can start understanding what was the situation. Okay, I understand that now. It's also really important to clarify what else is going on in your life. I know for a fact my lovely wife has a habit, might be a habit. When she finally gets angry with me, it's never about what I've done. It's always the straw that broke the camel's back. There is always a whole load of other things happening that are building the stress in her life that meant she was emotionally less resilient to the annoying thing I did that ordinarily wouldn't bother her. So cut yourself some slack. Give yourself the opportunity to go, okay, this is how I reacted. What else is going on in my life? What pressure do I feel under? What is taxing my emotional energy? I should take that into consideration as well. Then we look at the how did I react? What did I actually do? Because when I first started thinking about this, it was I'm aggressive. I'm not aggressive, but I attack. If I feel attacked, my response is to attack back because I want to be right. But that isn't always the response. Sometimes it's to withdraw. Sometimes it's to defer. Sometimes it's any kind of behavior that happens when we are emotionally triggered. Understanding what it is. What do I do? Because if I don't understand what I do when I'm triggered, how can I make a judgment as to whether it serves me or not? So really getting granular on what do I do when these triggers are triggered. And then a really big one, what are the consequences? So it's not just what happened, but it's what is the impact on me as a result of how I behave when I'm triggered. There will always be consequences. and really understanding whether actually, you know what, this keeps me safe, but doesn't get my opinion across, doesn't get the fact that I feel slighted by someone or whatever it might be. It doesn't help me set a boundary. It doesn't help me maintain a boundary. Unless we understand the consequences of it, it's difficult to start building action for the future. So that's frustratingly it. Doesn't seem like a lot. And I know that whenever I come to these things, or whenever somebody goes, oh, I'll teach you how to do X, Y, or Z, I wish there were this secret that people were keeping back from me that might be a little bit difficult for me to get my head around in the first instance. But once I do, once they share it with me, then I'm suddenly going to be able to resolve all of my difficulties. It doesn't work that way. This stuff is really simple in the theory. It's very difficult to do in practice. And that's the other point. This takes practice, practice and practice and practice. To begin with, you won't be able to do this until a period of time after the event, right? Okay, let's just accept that. It's going to take, we'll come to it after the event, fine. With practice, the period of time we can do the reflection draws closer to the moment we are reflecting on. And with even further practice, we can do it in the moment. So I refer back to the clothesline incident. My wife came down and said, oh my God, didn't expect you to do that today. I was expecting it to be 6 weeks. This is what happens when you don't let me procrastinate. The look on her face was shock. And in that moment, I recognized I was in an emotional reaction. Now, I didn't know what it was about. I don't know what the trigger was. I don't know anything else other than the fact I am in an emotional reaction. And so instead of getting into a two-way with my wife, which was never going to be a positive experience, I stopped. I said, oh my God, just realized I'm in the middle of a triggered emotional reaction. I wonder what I can learn about myself in this moment. Now, she looked at me like I'm a weirdo. However, trying to persuade somebody else I'm not a weirdo has never served me, ever. So having these moments where, oh my God, my awareness practice is so good now, I can interrupt this emotional reaction. I can give myself the opportunity to go, actually, you know what? I just realized this is happening to me, and I'm going to go away and I'm going to think about what that might mean, because, you know, I can change my behavior. This would be amazing. Definitely you get looks for that. But it doesn't matter, because I'm learning about me. And the next time I'm in a situation, my awareness kicks in even quicker. And eventually we're in situations that we've done the awareness work on what happens. We've done the awareness work on the consequences. We've done the awareness work on the certainties. We don't react. We can see things coming in a way we currently or previously can't. So the number of times I find myself in emotional reaction now is vanishingly rare. And when I do, I don't view it as a negative thing. I view it as an opportunity to go in search of another certainty. What is it I think I know that feels threatened? So that is the first part of the work. It is all about pausing. It is about creating time after the fact to genuinely reflect on what's happened. Slowly but surely, that period of awareness comes closer to the moment, to the now, and then you become clairvoyant. You get to see the future and go, yeah, you know what? I don't think that's going to work for me. I'm going to not even enter that situation. Okay, however, that is not all we need to do. Back to the three things I said I wanted to broaden and deepen awareness about. How do we know if something is in service to us or not? It's really important that we get crystal clear on what it is we are trying to create for ourselves. So much of my earlier life, I was just blown hither and thither by other people's expectations, by expectations of work, whatever it might be. And it took me far too many years to get to a point where you go, well, actually, what do I really want? And I will give you the five. I think I've said this before as well, that all of this stuff is interlinked. I'll give you the 5 things I think we all really want. We all really need. We want to feel like we're seen for who we are. We want to feel like we're heard for what we have to say. We want to feel accepted for both of those things. We want to feel loved. We want to feel safe. And that safety falls into physical. So it would be financial, roof on your head, all those kind of things. Body safety. They are emotional, psychological safety. Is this a space I feel like I can be who I am? And I think there's spiritual safety as well. So when we are looking at what am I trying to create, it is never the mechanism we use. It is never status. It's never money. Those are all in service to a deeper meaning. Maybe it's physical safety. Maybe it's I want to be seen. But if we can clarify what is it I really want around those 5 things, then we are in a much better place to recognize whether our reactions are serving us or not. Because don't get me wrong, there is a time for reaction. If you go in search of your certainties, these truths and beliefs, and you pressure test them, and some of them are still valid, and the reaction to that valid truth and belief is to emotionally react, that reaction is in service to you. What it isn't is a habit. What it isn't is a protection mechanism. What it isn't is a fear of being wrong, a fear of uncertainty. So don't just automatically say or think that I'm saying you should never react. But give yourself the opportunity to understand whether that reaction is truly who you are, and is it truly in service to what you are trying to create. That brings us to the final point, which is really assessing those beliefs and truths is really challenging work. It's difficult work. We are brilliant at, I call it peeling the onion, because you're never quite sure how many layers there'll be, and it's almost certainly going to make you cry. So when we're really good at getting down one layer, and then we find something and go, oh yeah, cool, yeah, I thought that was it. So yeah, brilliant, I'm self-aware. I was like that for 20 years. It's how do we get deeper and deeper and deeper? All of those limiting beliefs, not even aware most of them exist, but they are automating our reactions. And if that is work you are seriously considering, now I am a coach, so I will caveat that I get paid to help people do this, but it is definitely worth finding someone you can talk to and who can help you with those things. And the final, very, very final piece is cut yourself some slack. Be kind to yourself, right? The 2-4-6 framework I work for, the 6 essential elements, the first one is compassion. And that is compassion to yourself. The suspension of judgment, the moving it aside so you can get to know who you are. Be interested in what's happening. Don't be dismissive of it. Don't be judgmental of it. Be interested in what you can learn from your reactions. And then the other thing I would recommend, and this is another one of those, hey, trying to persuade people I'm not a weirdo has never served me. Apologize when it's appropriate. If you react and it causes an issue that you didn't intend, be bold enough and courageous enough to say, I'm really sorry. It was not my intention. This is what I thought was happening. And be honest with people that you're working on it. Now that feels like a vulnerable space to be in, but I've never had anybody think worse of me because I said, actually, you know what, I'm working on this thing at the moment, and this is a really interesting conversation because it's brought this up for me. It's not about you, that's entirely about me. It's hugely disarming as well, by the way, as a little kind of side, that if you want to start disarming people who are ready for a fight, tell them it's all about you. And they go, oh, but I think it's all about you. Yeah, you're right. What? Anyway, so that is it. This is about giving yourself the time to reflect, deepening your awareness of what is actually happening rather than the trigger person. This is all about being curious about what it is you're really trying to create for yourself. Being really clear about, is this in service to me? Because if it isn't, while you're not in that emotional state, you get to start rewriting your blueprint. You get to start saying, actually, that doesn't work. So be more aware when these things feel like they're about to be triggered. That's it. Give yourself time. Don't judge yourself. That is it. I will ask you, Jenny, if you have any questions, but I'm going to end this recording beforehand. So thank you very much, everybody who is watching this live and the video on YouTube. Please make sure you're subscribed to both the YouTube channel and the newsletter from School of Humankind. You can get that at schoolofhumankind.com. There are 2 events a week, 3 events a week, every week. Very diverse faculty. There's lots to be exposed to. Bridge to 10%. If this person doesn't interest you, find somebody else. If that idea is challenging, bear with it. See whether you can learn from it. There's so much going on. But yeah, that is it for me. I wish you a peaceful and joyful, however long it is until I next speak to you, and I will speak to you soon.